Hey guys, today we're going to be checking out the Battlefield 6 open beta using the RTX 5070 Ti. We're using the Asus TUF Gaming OC version of the card. Of course, the 5070 Ti has 16 gigabytes of GDDR7 video memory. We're playing on the latest NVIDIA drivers and pairing with 64 gigabytes of DDR5 as well as a 9800X 3D. Let's hop in. All right, to begin with here, we'll start off at 1080p. Now, 1080p, this game is very well optimized, so I anticipate this will be a pretty short test at 1080p, but we're going to test out just a few settings here. So first of all, TAA, this is native at the high presets. Just one off of the ultra over here at high. And just like all of my previous benchmarks, we're going to be using the Conquest mode. So this is the 32v32 mode. There is a bit of variance in FPS depending on the mode that you play, as well as the map that you're playing on. So just keep that in mind. Conquest is like the classic Battlefield 32v32 with vehicles. Some maps don't have vehicles, most do. So we'll check out the performance in Conquest. So starting off here, beginning of the match, this is one of the bigger maps here. So these maps tend to have, the bigger maps tend to have better performance than some of the smaller maps. Now, the other thing I will say about Battlefield is it is a bit of a CPU demanding game, so the 9800X 3D will be doing some of the heavy lifting for us here. If you do have a weaker CPU pairing, you could potentially be seeing slightly worse performance, so just keep that in mind. Now on high settings here at native, we are using just about 8 gigabytes of video memory, pulling about 200 watts out of our GPU, and we are just about fully utilized on our GPU. As far as the actual graphics go, the high settings, the medium settings, and the ultra settings, in my opinion, there isn't a super significant difference when it comes to the actual visual quality. They all look pretty freaking solid in my opinion. There's not like a huge night and day difference that you see when it comes to, you know, bumping up from medium even all the way to ultra, skipping high. But overall, I mean, the game looks beautiful. I think Battlefield, the series in general, 2042, Battlefield 5, Battlefield 1, the last few entries here have all been really impressive. The scale of the maps, and even, you know, it does a good job of, at scale they look great, and then even coming up, you know, and looking at some fine details, they seem to do a good job not really making too many significant compromises either way. Now our 1% lows here, we're on the Frostbite engine, I should mention, which is that bespoke custom-made engine for the Battlefield and Battlefront games. Don't believe that they've been used in any other games to my knowledge, though maybe they should be, because honestly all the tests that I've done on this game have resulted in really great performance. The game looks good, and we are also getting really solid FPS and really solid 1% lows. So really no need for any sort of upscaling in my opinion here at high settings. However, at 1080p, there is the issue that using TAA on these low resolutions does result in a bit of a softer image. So about 240 here, TAA, we'll go ahead and stop counting. And what you may want to consider doing here is, even if you don't use anti-aliasing, they do have the option of using DLAA. So DLAA is far better looking than TAA, but it does pull a little bit more power out of our GPU, so it's a bit more demanding than just those kind of standard TAA that we're used to. Now TAA will be like definitely acceptable when we are talking about 1440p and 4K for sure, but 1080p is is that use case where I do think going for a more advanced anti-aliasing solution, and whether that is DLAA or even just DLSS at quality, either one would really likely result in a better looking picture than just the the standard kind of TAA solution, in my personal opinion. The other benefit certainly is that if you were to use one of the DLSS models, quality or down, you're going to be getting, maybe a quality balance. You'll be getting, maybe the same picture quality as TAA. In my opinion, it actually looks a bit better due to the sharpness. But you're also going to be getting a boost to your FPS. So where we were getting around 240 using TAA, now moving over to DLAA, looks much better as far as like the sharpness of the picture, and does result in a slight dip to our FPS, now averaging about 213. So I think that's about a 30 FPS dip, but really coming from 240 down to 213, it's not super noticeable in my opinion. So I do think that would be worth the trade-off in this particular instance. Now, the other thing you could do, because we are using the transform model we know is baked into this game, we could just come in here and rather than using DLAA, we can throw on DLSS at quality. So this will have kind of the same effect of using that transformer model to render a sharper image. And at quality, even 1080p at quality looks pretty freaking close, if not better than native TAA. And now you can see we've gone back to that native resolution FPS and even a bit more. So where we were getting around 240, now we're getting closer to 260 at times. So I would definitely think that, you know, if you're playing at high settings here, you're going to be getting a really great experience. And there's not really a great reason to use TAA, in my opinion. I think you're better off, if you want the best possible, you know, no upscaling playing at native, go for DLAA. If you want a little bit of a boost to your FPS with, you know, not very many, if any, like negative trade-offs, go for this setting, the quality setting. Pretty much gives you the same performance as TAA, actually a bit better due to the fact that we are doing some mild upscaling here. And it also renders the image at, you know, much sharper looking, like visual fidelity. So yeah, high settings, not a huge surprise. You know, 1080p, this card is definitely, you know, I'd say it's well beyond a 1080p card. It's more of a 1440p and really solidly, like, you know, entry level 4K GPU. And that certainly seems to be the case as we're seeing right now. Now, since high really was no issue whatsoever, let's just crank it all the way up to ultra for our graphics quality preset. As far as our anti-aliasing, we're back on native using TAA. Now, luckily, we did actually get the same map here, so we will get a very like-to-like. I thought that chat was coming straight at me. We will get a very like-to-like comparison here. So remember, we were getting right around 240 at TAA high. Here, ultra, I mean, I'll let you be the judge. You can rewind. To my eye, I'll have to wait for, like, you know, proper side-by-side graphics testing, but in my personal opinion, I don't really think that there's a major difference in you know, in a visual quality or graphics quality moving from high to ultra. So I wouldn't really recommend playing on this particular preset due to the fact that I don't think it really offers much in terms of improvement from high, and from, you know, medium to high is maybe a bit of a larger jump, but still pretty minor, all things considered. So you can see, you know, short run here, obviously just kind of running around our starting zone. Could be altered by action, vehicles, explosions, different maps, tons of different things. But luckily, this is actually the same exact place where we were running around in the last benchmark, because I can't get this guy. But as you can see, about a 20 FPS dip from our high setting. But again, coming from 240 down to 220 is not really super significant at all. So can certainly handle the ultra preset. The only issue here, of course, is just the fact that we are playing on TAA for anti-aliasing, which 1080p does not look great. Now, a lot of that will depend on the size of your monitor. I am playing on a large monitor that has like variable resolution, so it's a 32-inch 1080p monitor that I'm sitting pretty close to. If you're sitting on a, you know, playing on a 22-inch 1080p monitor or something like that, TAA will likely offer, you know, a better looking picture. It won't be as noticeable, some of the blurring that it happens to do, but in general, it does result in a bit of a softer image, that's for sure. That's kind of how it resolves the anti-aliasing issue, the jagged edges, just kind of by blurring those pixels. And but regardless, obviously, really strong FPS here, even on Ultra. Doesn't really seem to tax the card all that much. Using a bit more video memory, now closer to that 9 GB mark, but obviously well within our 16 GB allotment. So really, again, what I would recommend doing is either using DLAA, which we'll throw on here. This is the best looking solution, but really, you're between two, you're between two options. It's either DLAA or it's just slight upscaling, which will have the same result. They're going to give you a very, very sharp looking picture and better looking picture than TAA. The difference, of course, with using something like quality as opposed to DLAA, which we're on right now, is that you're going to get a little bit of a boost to your FPS. So DLAA, if you're okay with, getting like we're getting right around 180, in my opinion, this is totally adequate, but I know people have different preferences, and maybe you're just thinking, well, I may as well throw on quality, I'm just leaving FPS on the table, which is certainly true. and especially if you can't tell the difference, which I'll be honest with you, telling the difference between DLAA and DLSS quality is pretty difficult to do. It's a little easier to do at 1080p, but as we increase resolutions, it's kind of tricky to tell the difference when we are, our scaling is less dramatic. But around 190 here using DLAA, so another slight dip in our FPS, going from high to ultra now. But in general, still obviously very, very high FPS using DLAA here. And really what I would probably do, and maybe, I imagine other people would do, is rather than going for the DLAA, go for DLSS quality here. This is going to give you still a very, very sharp looking picture. And if you are on DLAA, I recommend just checking out the DLSS quality mode just to see what it can kind of offer you. In my opinion, this does look better than TAA, and it offers essentially the same performance as native, and likely it should actually offer us a bit more as we continue playing here. Though again, a lot of that's dependent on like what's going on in the map, but obviously stands to reason that playing at essentially a lower resolution here would give you a higher FPS. So it'll also give you a bit of a break when it comes to your video memory. Obviously not super significant or important on this particular GPU when we already have so much video memory to work with, but I would definitely recommend playing, on one of those options, DLAA or DLSS quality, both really great looking models and much, much better than the stock default TAA option that it'll offer you at native. But in general here, as we go ahead and exit out of the game, get ready for our next head test. But obviously not a huge surprise, but 1080p is no match for this card. This card absolutely chews through every single setting at 1080p, really no issue whatsoever. And now moving up to 1440p, which I really think is the sweet spot for this GPU, where you can get both really great performance and really good looking visuals, a bit higher resolution obviously than just 1080p. So we're going to start off on medium here. I'm going to do a little bit more extensive test here. So medium at native TAA. So now at 1440p, and again, we're on the medium preset at native resolution. Now TAA looks much better the more pixels you have, so moving up to 1440p does result in a much better looking picture. It's not quite as soft as we were experiencing at 1080p. You can see that our FPS is incredibly high. Our 1% lows are really, really solid, right around 133, averaging to begin with here in like the 180 range right now. You can see, obviously, we have some smoke effects. See, we run through that, we go down to like 170. So there are like a ton of different effects, environments, explosions, vehicles. There's so many different like circumstances that you can encounter in this game. They'll all kind of affect your FPS in slightly different ways. So just keep that in mind. But running around here, obviously, still incredibly competitive, high FPS, even at native resolution here using the medium preset. Now, again, just like 1080p, and really this stands true and pretty much until we get to 4K, and even 4K, honestly, in a lot of instances, I think will look better. But TAA, honestly, you're playing at native. If that's important to you, just knowing or saying that you're playing at the native resolution with no upscaling, you can certainly do that. But the issue just is that TAA, it's an outdated, old temporal anti-aliasing. It's just an old anti-aliasing solution. It's effective. There's no jaggies or anything. If you look at like small ropes, things like that, it will kind of get rid of those issues, but at the cost of a little bit of sharpness. So it kind of, some good, some bad, as there's definitely a lot of enemies here. But in general, it does kind of result in a bit of a softer image that we'd like to address. And the way we do that is, of course, using a different anti-aliasing solution, or upscaling, which essentially acts as our anti-aliasing solution. So that's what we'll do first here, is just throw on DLAA. So this is the definitely going to be the best possible looking picture that we could get. This is just using that transform model as a matter of resolving the anti-aliasing rather than actually doing any sort of upscaling. Still playing at our native resolution, and looks incredibly sharp. Really, really strong looking picture here. And in my opinion, you're still getting a competitive FPS, still well above like 120 FPS. So you'd be able to populate 120 hertz screens without any sort of issue. I guess the only issue I'm pretty sure that there's 175 hertz 1440p panel. So I guess that particular panel wouldn't be, fully populated, but otherwise, you're barely missing just a few, percentage points to get that fully populated. But in general, Still really nice looking picture here and getting right around 160 FPS. Looks better than TAA for sure at the cost of a little bit of FPS, but really not enough to really be a deciding factor in my personal opinion. I think that, you know, the increase in the sharpness and the clarity of the picture is certainly worth the slight FPS trade-off here. But really, again, if you wanted the best of both worlds, you'd go for DLSS to quality, which essentially looks native. It looks absolutely great. And now, of course, we are getting right back to pretty much what we were getting using TAA, and in fact a bit better with, you know, better looking visuals. So this is really the sweet spot if you don't want to do a lot of upscaling. You kind of want to play at near native resolution but want, you know, better looking anti-aliasing. The solution is pretty simple. It's DLSS quality. It's been like, you know, people who are on modern GPUs for a few years, DLSS quality has kind of been the go-to, in my opinion, if you know, you just want a good looking picture but also want, you know, solid FPS. It gives you a slight boost to your FPS while not, you know, completely drastically changing the look of your image here. So definitely a really strong option here, getting around 200 FPS. Still, again, I don't know why I keep jumping into combat because it's kind of messing with the benchmark here. I just can't help myself. But still, the other great thing is just how smooth the frames are being delivered. Our 1% lows are incredibly respectable. Obviously, jumping in and out of those loading screens that are the map selector is kind of messing with it, but otherwise you can see just how strong those 1% lows are, sitting right about 150. So even our 1% lows, what it's dipping down to when it stutters and things like that, which is bound to happen, still in that competitive FPS range. So really solid option here for quality. And now at 1440p, I definitely feel comfortable bumping down even a little bit more. Let's actually just go straight for performance, and we'll see how this looks. You can see, based on our GPU utilization, this is now where the GPU is doing all it can. Now it's more reliant on our CPU. So our 9800X 3D at this point is becoming the bottleneck. Trying to push out those 200 1440p resolution frames is becoming a little bit of a challenge for it. But if you wanted, you know, to just maximize your FPS, get a little bit more solid of a picture, I personally like being GPU bound scenarios. From my experience, seem to have a little bit less stuttering. But if you just wanted highest possible frame rate and, you know, wanted to use more aggressive upscaling, you can play here at that balance preset, and, or sorry, the performance preset here, and get really solid FPS, pretty much above 200 FPS all the time with 1% lows, kind of sitting right around the same area as we were before, right around the 150s or 160s. So the medium preset here. The main thing too, in my opinion, is like, it still looks really great. I mean, just looking around the world, still incredibly detailed. Maybe there's some things like shadows, you know, lighting that's not necessarily quite as good. I can kind of see now, like if I look closely for it, some stuff rendering in front of me that I was not noticing on the other presets. But in general, if you're just looking for a high FPS experience here, again, I would probably go for that quality preset. Pretty much the same preset I would go for, you know, when we were on 1080p. I just think DLSS quality, when you have the transform model available, is really tough to beat. And certainly when we increase resolution to 1440p, it's going to look even better, even sharper. So really solid looking picture here. Medium settings, you're going to have a lot of options to kind of pretty much pick and choose the exact performance that you want to have. So with medium being no problem, let's go ahead, let's hop in, change over to high, go back to native here. So TAA, this is native 1440p on high settings now. All right, so moving up to the high preset here, again, we're starting off using TAA, anti-aliasing, which just has a little softer effect here, but does get rid of any of the those kind of weird jaggies, as you can see, but getting really solid FPS even on high settings here at 1440p. This card is definitely like 1440p. It's like a great 1440p card and an okay 4K card is kind of my experience with the 5070 Ti, which my opinion is like perfect for most people. I think 1440p should be the resolution that most people are playing on nowadays. It's a really great upgrade from 1080p while not being nearly as taxing as 4K. So definitely a really solid place to be at, and certainly seems to be holding true here. Getting really solid FPS, solid 1% lows. This Frostbite engine is just super impressive. So here on high, native here getting around the 160 on our average with 120. 1% lows. Super silky smooth experience here. Really happy with the performance. Now, the only issue, if you want to call it issue, is just the fact that we are using TAA. So let's go ahead and address that. So obviously, ideally, best case scenario, you wouldn't use TAA, you use DLAA, which I actually do think we'll still be able to use and get a competitive FPS, which my loose definition for what I consider a competitive FPS here is just above 120 frames per second, which we're certainly getting even using DLAA. So this is essentially high settings, perfect picture quality, perfect anti-aliasing using that transformer model to kind of resolve all of those kind of issues when it comes to anti-aliasing. DLAA also has a knack for kind of sharpening the image, but not over sharpening it in my opinion, just making it look just right. It's like just absolutely perfect on this transformer model. I think DLAA on the transformer model is, in my opinion, the best like the best use case for DLSS. I think it's just about perfect. So the fact that we can use this model on these settings and still get a competitive FPS sitting right around 147, 1% lows, around 110, 112, certainly really happy with that performance. But of course, we do have a bit of other options that we can test out here. So now just knocking down, going to DLSS, that grays out the anti-aliasing, so no longer using DLAA, and we want to go for the quality preset. So this is just mild upscaling here. So this is, in my opinion, at 1440p, certainly a better looking picture than we would be getting using TAA, with the added benefit that we're getting a bit more FPS. So in my opinion, again, no really great reason to go for TAA at any of these settings. I think, you know, the only reason you might want to go for it is at 1080p if you weren't getting the type of performance that you wanted, and if the DLSS model wasn't good enough to kind of just go for quality. But transformer model quality, even at 1080p, is solid, and certainly at quality here at 1440p is really great as well. So you can see 1% lows down at 120, and our FPS average right about 180. So really great performance here at high settings as well. Really no need. Obviously, I could go in, bump down every single setting. I'm not going to do that just for the sake of time, but just to see, if you're curious, what you can get at if you just want to play at high settings, get the most FPS possible. If we just went for ultra performance DLSS, this does, as you can see by our GPU utilization, kind of push us, same thing, into that area where we're not quite GPU bound. We are now kind of relying on our CPU. 70% CPU usage is awfully high for a game like this. And I'll go ahead and restart counting once we get loaded back in. Right there. So obviously you can see it does give us a slight boost to our FPS, but not a ton due to the fact that our 9800X3D is just kind of struggling to keep up with the frames that are being rendered. So great looking picture and no issues whatsoever. I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't look like super noticeably worse than quality. And we are, you know, obviously getting slightly better performance here, it looks like, and taking a bit of load off of our GPU, though. My personal opinion, I would rather the load be on the GPU when I'm playing game and, you know, let the CPU rest a little bit or deal with some other tasks. But regardless, however you choose to play, this is going to be really a great experience regardless. If you want to come all the way down to ultra performance, you certainly can get a bit higher FPS, or, you know, you can certainly play at DLAA or DLSS quality and get essentially the same performance or very similar performance while being a bit more GPU dependent. So definitely really happy with the performance here on high. Absolutely amazing performance. This game just is so fun to benchmark. I'm trying to squeeze out as many videos as I can just because it's so fun. And I do want people to know what their car is going to perform like when the game does release. So anyways, high settings, total pass. And now all that really leaves for us is to bump up to ultra. We'll go back to native here, so go to native TAA. So this is now the max possible settings here with TAA for our anti-aliasing. So ultra, 1440p native. So now moving up to ultra here, again we're at TAA, so it does kind of result in a bit of a blurry image, but you can see obviously those ultra settings are resulting in a slight dip to our FPS. I mean, in my opinion, I don't know. Again, I would need to see side-by-sides. And the fact that I do need to see side-by-sides is telling to me that it's not super noticeable what the visual difference is. my opinion, I'd probably just stick to the high preset. I think that looks plenty good, but if you want to just max out settings here, crank Ultra, which does put everything at maxed out settings, you could do so without really worrying about your FPS too much. So getting, still that above 120 FPS, as looks like this match is actually about to end here, but nice to see that Ultra settings here doesn't require the use of any sort of upscaling to get a playable or competitive FPS. Now, one thing I do want to see before this match ends is just to see if transitioning over to DLAA here, if that still results in us getting above 120 FPS, and it does seem to be the case. So still, we are just right above that kind of mark that I like to loosely be at, which is about, whoa, where's that come from? Which is about 120. We're just right over that 120 FPS mark here. So definitely happy with the performance. I wouldn't personally probably go for the Ultra preset. I just don't think the visuals are really all that much better that it really warrants going for this. But let's see if we can real quick before this match ends throw on our DLSS, Ultra Performance. So if you wanted these good looking visuals but wanted the highest possible FPS, you could throw on Ultra Performance here as well. That's another option for you, and now you are pretty much skyrocketed right into that position where you are actually not CPU bound in this particular instance. Doesn't appear. We are still getting pretty high GPU usage, but now you're getting really consistently very high frames with 1% lows at about 130. So really quick benchmark there at Ultra, just due to the fact that our match was ending and I wanted to get accurate results due to the fact that the results can change depending on the map that you're on. So I wanted to kind of just go through those real quickly on the same map. But yeah, just main takeaway there. I personally don't think that Ultra is really worth the drop in FPS, but if you were to do it, you can play native. You could even play with DLAA, and you can get a competitive FPS, which is really, really great to see on the 5070 Ti. So the fact that, it's a 1440p card that can be a 4K card, it absolutely kills the 1440p test. No issues whatsoever. And now finally moving up to our last resolution here, 4K. We're going to start off here on high. We'll test high and ultra here, going for just TAA native to begin with. So obviously this card is not really supposed to be like strictly a 4K card, but it can certainly do that in this game. It's pretty well optimized, so I have high hopes. So now at 4K high settings is where we start to see the limitations of the card. Now, not that the card is necessarily marketed as a 4K card, so we are still getting above 60 FPS, so I don't want to make it seem like I'm a complete snob about it, but certainly we can see here at high settings using about close to 10 gigabytes of video memory, hitting around 90 FPS on our average. Still really consistent frame times at around 70, high 70s, close to 80. So it feels like an incredibly smooth experience here. But in first-person shooters on PC, I just kind of personally, and it's a personal thing, but I personally have kind of this 120 FPS want for all of my first-person shooter or competitive games, where you can certainly have a great time at 60 FPS, and that is what the consoles are at 60 FPS, I believe, with performance modes going up to 80 FPS. So this is even, it averaging 90, it is above even those performance modes on consoles that we're getting right now. But unfortunately, I don't know, maybe I'm picky, but I would like to see a bit more. But given it's a 5070 Ti, which is definitely, not supposed to be, like the end-all be-all for 4K, that's definitely reserved for the 5080 and the 5090, of course, especially on like AAA games like Battlefield is. But this is definitely, although it's not yet a competitive FPS, it is a good place to start from. So we'll go ahead, load back in here, and let's see what we can do with a bit of DLSS. So let's go ahead, we'll throw on, not DLAA, because that's obviously not going to get us into where we want to be at. So let's just go for DLSS quality. I don't expect this to give us a major boost to our FPS. As you can see, we are getting close to that kind of loose 120 mark, at times hitting 120, pretty close to 120 actually on our average, a bit closer than I thought we'd be. And of course, the higher resolution is, so now at 4K DLSS quality here looks essentially native. In fact, it does look better. I feel very confident saying this looks markedly better than TAA native. So really no reason at 4K to not at least throw DLSS quality on, especially considering the fact that it comes baked in with a transform model, which is super nice. Although you can go in obviously and change your DLSS model. That's not difficult to do whatsoever. You know, I don't love doing that. As you can see, a slight FPS dip with the destructibility, which is to be expected, and very cool, all this destructible stuff. I love Battlefield for that, but I just don't love changing the DLSS model in multiplayer games. Although, as far as I know, there hasn't been any record or evidence of them banning people who are just changing, you know, to the transformer model, or, you know, changing DLSS files. As far as I know, they haven't really been too protective over those particular game files. Going in and changing game files for a multiplayer game is always something that I try to stay away from, and I, you know, far prefer to just, you know, try to make the stock solution work as best as I can, so I am not, you know, personally at any risk of getting banned, which would, you know, definitely not be worth it if you spent money on a game and, you know, get banned from it and can't play it at all on your account anymore, as well as like your Steam account or whatever account getting flagged for a ban. That's really not a fun thing to have happen. So nice to see that it comes with DLSS transform model preset K by default, which I you know, discovered in a one of my earlier benchmarks, but wouldn't really, you know, suggest playing here on anything other than at least quality. But now that we are on 4K, we can really crank this pretty far down. So let's actually just jump straight down to ultra performance, and I'll kind of just show you the picture quality here as we begin counting. And you tell me. I mean, I know it is compressed. I do record at a very high bit rate and upload at a very high bit rate, but of course YouTube does their thing and they do kind of crush the image to a certain extent. Obviously, it's not going to be picture perfect, but in my personal opinion, this still looks incredibly solid. No weird visual artifacting or anything like that. No weird, you know, like effects and motion that we, you know, saw in some other tests when we were using aggressive upscaling at 1080p. Maybe some stuff when we're kind of running by trees, maybe if you're really looking for it. But to be honest with you, it still looks really great. You know, you might want to go for maybe performance as opposed to ultra performance to get kind of a high FPS without as aggressive of upscaling, but that is definitely, oh, as I just hugged that grenade. I don't know why I did that, but yeah, it is definitely nice to see here that you can throw on ultra performance, and due to the fact that we are on 4K, it still looks definitely acceptable here. I guess the other thing we may as well check out while we're here, kind of going backwards, but let's just drop down to performance just to see kind of what sort of performance we can get here. And performance does get us above that 120 FPS mark that we're kind of looking for, and do it really, really consistently. So this is another option, just going for, you know, kind of cranking down or up, however you want to put it, your DLSS settings until you find an FPS that you're comfortable with. If you're playing at 4K, you know, most people, I primarily play at 4K, so I know, you know, myself, I typically kind of just, I play a ton with DLSS, even when I don't necessarily need it, when I'm playing on my 5090 and I know I can just kind of crank it at max. Oftentimes I'll just throw on DLSS, especially when there is the transform model, just because it looks so good. And oftentimes I'll just kind of gradually notch down until I get the FPS that I like. Normally around like quality or balanced is plenty for me. And also it has the added benefit of taking a bit of the load off of your 5090 or your 5070 Ti or whatever card that you're using. So this is performance here. And really not a huge difference when it comes to FPS between performance and ultra performance. So you may want to play here just to get rid of a bit of that kind of weirdness that you may notice. The only thing I really notice, honestly, in motion is like trees, like the leaves off in the distance, some of these finer details far away in motion when you're kind of sprinting around and panning your camera around. It's the main thing I noticed, but otherwise, really, really solid FPS. 1% lows are a bit lower. Let's go and restart counting, see if they drop back down to, yeah, kind of 90, 80 area. That's kind of low for our 1% lows. In practice, it's not really resulting in any sort of like major issue, but something to keep in mind. It does seem that the more demanding that we're kind of, you know, more demanding that we're kind of asking for our card here is certainly seeming to pan out in multiple ways, including slightly hurting our 1% lows. So in general, though, really, really happy with the performance across the board here on high settings. Great performance. All right, and the last preset we have here is going for Ultra 4K. So we'll start off. We know we're not going to really get the FPS that we want playing it native, but I do want to see what we get here. So just TAA, this is native, ultra, and ultra settings here does actually go in and crank everything to ultra. Sometimes games like presets, like the max preset doesn't actually set every setting to the maximum setting. That's not the case for Battlefield 6. It actually does crank everything all the way up. So this is completely maxed out 4K using TAA. All right, so completely maxed out 4K here at TAA, which TAA is really adequate in my opinion for 4K resolution. There's not really a super great need to go for DLAA. I think if I was not happy with the type of picture I was getting using TAA, I would likely rather just go for DLSS quality as opposed to going for DLAA. It's a bit more demanding than really. So I can't get up that ledge. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's a bit more demanding that I think is really worth it, in my personal opinion. But as you can see, getting around 90 FPS, very, very similar to what we were getting on high. But really, although it's very close to what we were getting on high, I just don't think that there's really great reason to go for ultra as opposed to high due to the fact that it's going to be more demanding, and in my opinion, it's just not very, it's not like a huge difference as far as our visual quality. Now, this is a good time just to kind of check in about our video memory. Not that we were, should be super concerned about it really whatsoever, but if we were, should kind of alleviate our concerns just seeing that we are only using just about pretty close to like 11 gigabytes of video memory. So the 16 gigabytes that this card has is plenty for Battlefield 6. Seems to be handling it just fine, and despite the fact that our FPS is slightly lower than I would personally like, again, I try to target in FPS games like around 120 FPS. We are certainly getting a really solid 1% low, sitting right around 70 with an average around 90 is leading to a pretty smooth performer here. So at this point, really what I would recommend doing is switching over to DLSS. And again, I'm just going to go for DLSS quality here to begin with, just to see what we can get and see if this does shoot us into that 120 FPS range. Unfortunately, it does not look like it puts us immediately there, although it does get us close. It puts us just below, and we'll go ahead and hop back in here, restart counting. Obviously, these kind of screens, as you can see, it shoots us at 124. It's not super accurate, although I believe the game is rendering behind our screen here, but we'll go ahead and start counting again. So we kind of are looking for like roughly 120. That's kind of what I'm personally looking for. I'm good. You guys can go without me. That's personally what I'm kind of looking for. But, if you were, as we kind of, oh, we're in a vehicle now. Okay, that might be a good time to test out some of the vehicle stuff. As you can see, effects like smoke grenades, things like that will slightly impact your performance here. But in general, we're still just ever so slightly under where I would like to be at. Not by a lot, but just ever so slightly under. And really the last thing to do here is just to see if we wanted highest possible FPS here. If we just want to go for ultra performance and on ultra settings, so using, the kind of the benefits of the card here to get the best possible performance, what could we get? And it looks like it's around 140 FPS with 109 1% lows. So this is another seemingly really great place to play at. And again, that is mainly due to the fact that we are on this transformer model that really just handles upscaling so incredibly. Having the ability to use a 4K resolution to your advantage, the fact that we are using such a high resolution, ultra performance typically, if you're on a lower resolution, would typically be much lower, but because we're already on pretty high resolution here, using ultra performance both gives you high FPS and also still results in a really good looking picture here. So really the 5070 Ti, like I said, it's a card that is really great at 1440p and really great at 1080p and good at 4K. And the good at 4K, the only reason I don't say great is because it really is dependent on a lot of things. Dependent on the model of DLSS that the game comes baked in with. Depends on how well optimized the game is, which in Battlefield 6's case, the game is properly and well optimized. So it does actually result in a really good looking picture. So if those things are true and everything hits right, then you will get really good results like we're seeing here. So yeah, I'm on a 4K monitor, and honestly, if I were playing here, I'd have absolutely no concern whatsoever. In my opinion, the image quality looks totally fine, even with all these trees like sprinting across. Not really seeing any like majorly terrible visual artifacting or nothing like that. Seems to be a really, really solid place to play at. Anyways, guys, that's been it for the RTX 5070 Ti in Battlefield 6. Performed absolutely great as expected. The 5070 Ti, I think, if you have the money for it, is the right card for a lot of people. I think a lot of people playing at 1440p or even 4K would find a lot of value in a properly priced 5070 Ti. But if you can get one for close to MSRP, definitely a good buy, as I've seen in a lot of different benchmarks now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.